So if your blood sugar is running high and you are trying to bring it down through what you eat, this video is going to give you something genuinely practical to work with. Because most of the advice out there on this topic is either too vague to be useful, or it is just a list of things to avoid. And while knowing what not to eat matters, what I find far more useful, both for myself and for my patients, is knowing exactly what to eat and why it works at a biological level. Because once you understand the mechanism, the food choices stop feeling like arbitrary rules and start making complete sense. I'm Dr. Alex, an emergency medicine doctor with nearly a decade working across the NHS. High blood sugar is something I see the consequences of every single day. And what I want you to understand is that food is not just fuel. In the context of blood sugar, specific foods are essentially tools. They interact with your metabolism in precise ways, and choosing the right ones at the right time can make a genuinely significant difference to your glucose levels within hours, not weeks. So let me walk you through exactly what those foods are and what the science actually says about each one. The first and honestly one of the most powerful foods for bringing blood sugar down quickly is leafy green vegetables, spinach, kale, Swiss chard, broccoli. I know that is not the exciting answer people are hoping for, but stay with me because the mechanism here is really worth understanding. Leafy greens are extremely low in digestible carbohydrates, which means they contribute almost nothing to your blood sugar directly. But beyond that, they are rich in magnesium. And magnesium is something that most people with high blood sugar are quietly deficient in without knowing it. Research published in the journal Diabetes Care found that higher magnesium intake was significantly associated with lower fasting blood glucose and improved insulin sensitivity. What magnesium does is support the function of insulin receptors on your cells. Think of insulin as a key and the receptor as a lock. Magnesium essentially keeps those locks working properly. When you are deficient in it, your cells become less responsive to insulin even when your pancreas is producing plenty of it. So eating leafy greens consistently is not just about avoiding carbohydrates. It is about actively improving the machinery your body uses to manage glucose in the first place. The second food is apple cider vinegar, and I want to be precise here because there is a lot of noise around this one. The research on apple cider vinegar and blood sugar is actually more solid than most people realize. A study published in the journal Diabetes Care found that consuming 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar before a high-carbohydrate meal reduced post-meal blood glucose spikes significantly compared to a placebo. And a separate study in the Journal of Functional Foods found that daily apple cider vinegar consumption reduced fasting blood sugar in people with type 2 diabetes over a 12-week period. The mechanism comes down to acetic acid, which is the active compound in vinegar. Acetic acid slows the rate at which your stomach empties after eating, which means glucose enters your bloodstream more gradually, rather than flooding in all at once. It also appears to improve insulin sensitivity in muscle tissue and suppress certain enzymes involved in carbohydrate digestion in the gut. 2 tablespoons diluted in a glass of water before your largest meal is the amount that appears most consistently in the research. Do not drink it neat because it is acidic enough to damage your tooth enamel and irritate your esophagus over time. Third on the list is fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring. And I want to explain why this earns its place specifically in a blood sugar conversation. Because most people associate fish with heart health rather than glucose control. The connection is more direct than you might think. Chronic high blood sugar is almost always accompanied by chronic inflammation, and that inflammation itself worsens insulin resistance, creating a vicious cycle where high blood sugar drives more inflammation, which drives worse blood sugar control. Omega-3 fatty acids found in fatty fish are among the most well-researched anti-inflammatory compounds in nutritional medicine. A meta-analysis published in Diabetes and Metabolism found that omega-3 supplementation significantly improved insulin sensitivity and reduced inflammatory markers in people with metabolic syndrome. By reducing the inflammatory environment around your cells, omega-3s help those cells respond to insulin more effectively. Beyond that, fatty fish is pure protein with 0 carbohydrates, so it has no direct impact on blood glucose at all while keeping you full and satisfied for hours. Fourth is cinnamon. And I want to be careful here because cinnamon gets overhyped in wellness circles and the research is more nuanced than the headlines suggest. But when you look at the actual studies carefully, there is something genuinely real here. A meta-analysis published in the Journal of Medicinal Food analyzed multiple randomized controlled trials and found that cinnamon supplementation produced significant reductions in fasting blood glucose across multiple populations. The active compounds in cinnamon, particularly something called cinnamaldehyde, appear to improve insulin signaling at the cellular level and may also slow carbohydrate digestion in the gut similarly to how acetic acid does. Half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon daily is the amount supported by the research. And I want to emphasize Ceylon cinnamon specifically because the more common cassia cinnamon contains higher levels of a compound called coumarin, which can be harmful to the liver in large amounts over time. So the type matters. 1 teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon stirred into your morning oats or yogurt is an easy and evidence-backed addition to your daily routine. Fifth is legumes: lentils, chickpeas, black beans, kidney beans. And this one surprises people because legumes do contain carbohydrates, so instinctively people with high blood sugar avoid them. But the type of carbohydrate in legumes is fundamentally different from the type in bread or rice or processed food. Legumes are rich in soluble fiber and resistant starch, both of which dramatically slow the digestion and absorption of glucose. A study published in the Archives of Internal Medicine found that people with type 2 diabetes who ate a cup of legumes daily for 3 months had significantly lower fasting blood glucose and HbA1c levels compared to those who did not. The glycemic index of legumes is remarkably low despite their carbohydrate content, precisely because of that fiber and resistant starch content. They essentially create a slow release of glucose over several hours rather than a rapid spike. They also feed beneficial gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, and those fatty acids have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity independently. So legumes are one of those foods that look like they should raise blood sugar but consistently do the opposite in the research. Sixth is nuts, specifically almonds, walnuts, and pistachios. A handful of nuts eaten alongside a meal or as a snack is one of the simplest and most effective ways to blunt a blood sugar spike. The combination of healthy fats, protein, and fiber in nuts slows gastric emptying, meaning the entire meal you just ate is digested more slowly, and glucose enters the bloodstream at a much more manageable rate. A study published in the journal Metabolism found that eating almonds with a high-carbohydrate meal significantly reduced post-meal blood glucose compared to eating that same meal without them. Walnuts in particular also contain plant-based omega-3s, which, as I already covered, reduce the inflammation that drives insulin resistance. And pistachios have been specifically studied for their effect on blood sugar, with research showing meaningful reductions in fasting glucose with regular consumption. And the seventh food is eggs. Simple, accessible, and genuinely powerful in the context of blood sugar management. Eggs contain essentially zero carbohydrates and are rich in high-quality protein and healthy fats. That combination does two things simultaneously. First, it contributes nothing directly to blood glucose. Second, it slows the digestion of anything else you eat alongside them, reducing the overall glucose impact of the meal. But beyond that, there is something called the second meal effect, which I find really fascinating. Research has shown that a high-protein breakfast like eggs reduces not just the blood sugar spike after that breakfast, but also the spike after your next meal later in the day. Your body essentially remains in a more metabolically stable state for hours after a protein-rich start to the morning. There is also emerging evidence that specific compounds in egg yolks improve insulin sensitivity directly. So eggs at breakfast is not just a low-carbohydrate choice, it is an active intervention in how your body manages glucose for the entire first half of your day. So practically speaking, here is how to bring this all together. Build your meals around fatty fish, eggs, and legumes as your primary protein and carbohydrate sources. Load every plate with leafy greens. Add a small handful of nuts to meals or as snacks. Use Ceylon cinnamon daily in your breakfast. And take 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar diluted in water before your largest meal of the day. None of these are dramatic changes. None of them require expensive supplements or complicated protocols. But done consistently over 4 to 6 weeks, the research is really clear that these foods produce measurable reductions in fasting blood glucose, post-meal spikes, and insulin resistance. Food genuinely is medicine when you choose the right ones.